Dear friends, with greetings for you and a great Moscow hospitable land. That's an international club of people's unity is welcoming today great and a popular expert. He is a former CIA worker, Larry Johnson, always objectively. He gives a light to international events for us, Russian-speaking world. My name is Klintsevich Andrey. I'm also an analyst and I'm head of the analytical center on the conflicts. We also speak a lot and analyze what takes place, and we give the best light that we can so you would have information understanding where we're moving forward. Larry, I want to ask you a first question, because for us Russians, internal American politics is not always clear. As an example, the behavior of the leadership of the U.S. government, tweets, how they talk to the media, it's not regular. But we understand it's a certain practice, it's certain customs, maybe some changes of the president, these or those events. A lot of people have a disorientation. Where are we going? How do you see it from the American side, this last events, the communication Putin-Trump, and the future communication with Zelensky?
If you think the Russian people are confused, just imagine what it's like for the American people. Trump's unusual method of communication is can best be described as inconsistent and lacking strategic vision, and is at times appears designed more to confuse than to enlighten. Nonetheless, Trump's background as an entertainer that drives him more than anything. Now, I've been told by a source that I have some confidence in that in reality there has been much more extensive communication between President Trump and President Putin. And so by virtue of that they are, that's why I think we don't see President Putin reacting strongly to some of the seemingly very stupid things that Trump tweets. Such as with respect to Tomahawk missiles, or insisting on a ceasefire in place. I think President Putin has very plainly explained to Donald Trump Russia's position. There was just, in fact, I just saw a story that was being published in the United States suggesting that there's a possibility of a deal that if Ukraine withdrew from the Donbass, that they would not insist on keeping Zaporizhia and Kherson. So I looked at that and realized it was a bad story, stupid story, because there's no way that President Putin can give up Russian territory. Just impossible. But that illustrates the lack of understanding in the United States. They have not taken time to listen to what President Putin says. Putin has been clear, Lavrov has been clear, Ryabkov has been clear, that Maria Zakharova has been clear. And so they're not saying different things.
Они не меняют свое мнение, говорят разные вещи.
But both Donald Trump and his administration keep
Но
pretending
Дональд Трамп и
that
его
they are
администрация,
not saying what they're saying.
они не
So that's where I come back with the confusion here.
не говорят то же самое послание, не проговаривают его. То есть вот к этому и приходит и приводит недопонимание.
There's almost an expectation, perhaps,
Может быть, даже есть какое-то
or let
ожидание.
me rephrase that.
Немножко по-другому скажу.
Getting ready to go to this meeting in Budapest,
Когда они готовятся к этой
Next
встрече в
week.
Будапеште на следующей неделе,
there will be the expectations of some
ожидания
agreement,
каких-то
something big coming out.
соглашений, дебатов,
But it can't come from Putin.
но они не могут прийти к Путину,
I think if Vladimir Putin
потому что Владимир
were
Путин
to basically say, all right, we're not going to demilitarize Ukraine, we'll stop in place.
Вот здесь остановимся,
I think that would create a condition where he would actually be taken from power.
и тогда это
That would be seen as a
условия,
betrayal
когда его можно будет
of the
вывести
Russian
из
people.
власти, потому что он будет предателем российского народа, получается.
Yet that is the expectation that's going to be played up in the West.
И вот такие ожидания проигрывает Запад.
And so this will be,
Это будет
I'll call this Anchorage, Alaska, Part 2.
Anchorage, Alaska, часть вторая.
They meet, they
Встречаются,
exchange pleasantries,
они обмениваются
but,
приветствиями.
no serious agreement
Но
will come out of it,
серьезных
I don't think.
соглашений я не думаю, что будут.
So let me turn the question around and ask
Тогда
you.
я разверну вопрос и задам его вам.
There is widespread belief
Есть такое широкое
among military
распространение,
experts, so-called experts,
такие так называемые
and I use those with
эксперты,
quotation
мнения,
marks,
я так в кавычках их ставлю.
but they insist that Russia
Они настаивают на том, что
has suffered
русские
massive casualties
потеряли очень много.
and that the Russian military has made very, very slow progress.
Очень медленно
And they
продвигается.
attribute that to
И
incompetence.
они говорят о том, что нет компетентности у российской армии.
So, if you had a chance to address those so-called experts in the
Можете
West,
ли вы ответить вот таким так называемых в кавычках экспертов Запада?
what would you
Что бы
tell
вы
them?
сказали им?
Я очень много был
I was
на различных военных выставках
At
в
the-
Европе, в США,
different military exhibitions, both in United States and Europe,
в Лас-Вегасе или
Las
Шоу.
Vegas and others.
Я был на американских военных базах.
I was at American military bases.
Я видел, как тренируются, как идет боевая подготовка.
I have
американцев
seen
и
the
европейцев.
preparation of Americans and Europeans,
Я внимательно наблюдаю, как сейчас идут
and I
военные учения.
attentively watch how they study now, how they get into the field now.
И там я вижу отражение
And I
армии
see
России
the
20-х
mirror
годов.
of Russia in 20s.
У европейских политиков и
European
экспертов
politicians, they have
возникает иллюзия,
illusion
что красивые накрашенные
that
значит, лица,
beautiful
большие города,
big beards, beautiful faces with a paint, dark green paint on the faces. That's big army that tomorrow will take over Russia in a split of a second.
где-то на построении
Where
действительно выглядит
somehow,
красиво.
when you put them all in a line, it looks
Но сейчас война совершенно
pretty.
другая.
But the war is very different right now.
Любой танк на поле
Any
боя
tank on the field,
это лакомство,
it's a sweet, it's a dessert. It can be with the, you know, the neighbors can hit that tank.
Все поменялось.
Everything has changed.
Это как человек, который
It's like a
готовится идти в
person
поход,
who is
он дома
getting ready to
собрал
go on a
рюкзак,
hike. He
спальный
put on
мешок,
together
рюкзак,
the
готов,
sleeping
когда он
bag, the
поднимается в
backpack.
горы,
But when he gets
он
into the
вспоминает,
mountain,
что
he
не
remembers that
хватает
he doesn't have
этого,
enough
не
of
хватает
this
еды,
or that or
газовой
food,
горелки.
or maybe there's no gas or he
Под
forgot
второй поход
matches.
он что-то купит.
On a
И только к
second
третьему он
hike,
уже будет
he will
готов
buy
к
something
восхождению
else.
на Эверест.
But only on a third hike, he will be ready, maybe
Никакие учения
fully.
этого не дают.
No training will give you that.
Поэтому с
So,
точки зрения боевой готовности,
taking a look at how military is ready, Russian army is
одна из лучших в
one
мире
of the
с
best
точки
in the
зрения
world.
полевых
From the point of
боев.
view, if you take a look at the
Вторая
field
армия — это
fighting,
украинская.
the second army is Ukrainian army,
Не американская,
not American,
не европейская,
not
не
European
турецкая.
army, not Turkish.
Им кажется,
They think
что большое количество Абрамс,
that a lot of
Брэдли,
Abrams, Bradley, and
классно экипированные солдаты смогут
great
прорвать линию
soldiers,
фронта.
they can go through the
Этого
front
не
line.
будет.
No, it will not take
Ни
place.
одна американская боевая машина не готова.
Not one American vehicle is ready to fight on the field.
Она не увидит цели, как
They
будет
will
сожжена.
not see the target. They'll get burned before they
Наши
find
дроны
one.
на расстоянии
Our
50
drones
километров
at the
на
50
оптоволоконном,
kilometers
кабеле уничтожают все.
Distance, they take out everything on the optical cable, just the same Ukrainians do.
Поэтому мы двигаемся вперед на мотоциклах.
This is why we're moving forward on motorcycles, buggy, or we walk.
Танки превратились в защищенную
Tanks
артиллерийскую установку.
is more or less a protection against artillery.
Мы, Украина, меняемся так
We and Ukraine, we change so fast on the battlefield
мы не
that
успеваем это записать в виде каких-то полевых
we
уставов.
can't even put it on a paper. It changes so quick. In a month, everything changes again.
И мы и они придумываем новую форму вооруженной.
All of us come up with a new military invention.
Просто для сравнения,
Just to compare.
В Америке сейчас
In America
подписан новый
today,
контракт на
a new
модернизацию
contract
танков
is
«Абрамс»,
signed for Abrams
которые
tanks
должны подготовить
modernization,
его к антидроновой защите.
and it would prepare it for the anti-drone
Оно
protection.
включает в себя новую краску,
It includes new
которую
paint
не видно в тепловизоре,
that you
и
don't
металлические
see in a special
решетки сверху.
equipment and a metal bars
Срок
over.
исполнения 27 год.
That's time of execution is 2027.
К 27 году
By 27
война,
comes
скорее
in
всего,
the war.
будет в каком-то
I
совершенно
don't know.
другом
It will be
состоянии.
completely different measure.
Поэтому
So
возможность быстро адаптироваться
to
к полю
quickly
боя,
adapt to the battlefield,
как на поле боя,
as on
так
the
и
battlefield,
стратегически,
as
это наше
also
конкурентное
strategically.
преимущество.
Now that is how we are competitors in it. We're the
У
best
нас
in it.
валятся санкции,
We have a lot of
мы очень
sanctions.
быстро
We
меняемся.
quickly change.
Хотя здесь, в России,
Though
кто-то
here
говорит,
in
этого
Russia, some
недостаточно,
things
надо
is
еще
not
быстрее.
enough. We have to be faster.
Поэтому виды
So,
вооружений на новых физических
If you
принципах,
take a look at the
которые
physical
Россия сейчас
principles of the new militarization that
которые,
Russia
скорее
works
всего, на
in,
поле боя мы увидим
and
в
probably
26 году,
about a battlefield
они
we'll
будут
see in
еще более
2026, it'll be
революционными. И они
more
еще сильнее поменяют
revolutionized,
ведение вооруженных
and they will change the battlefield ground for sure.
Поэтому да, в настоящий
So
момент
yes, today,
и мы, и противник, ищем
us
способы
and the opponent,
воевать.
we're looking for
Потому
ways
что
to
сейчас
fight because
У нас намного больше дронов,
we have a lot more
намного
drones,
больше людей,
a lot more
но мы не
people,
можем быстро идти
but
вперед,
we
потому
can
что это
quickly
связано
run
с потерями.
forward because it will mean losses.
И когда американские
And when
политики говорят,
American
что
politicians say
русские войска
that
слабые,
Russian army is weak,
они не могут двигаться
they
вперед,
can't move forward,
они даже себе не представляют,
they
что в этих
can't even
условиях,
imagine that in
если
these
сейчас
terms and
напротив России
conditions,
встанет
if
любое такое же
any
подразделение НАТО,
same division of NATO will stand
оно будет
against
уничтожено
Russia,
гарантированно за неделю.
they will be taken out on a week's
В
time.
качестве примера,
As an example,
Квантунская армия
Kwantung
японцев,
army of Japanese
которая
that
более 10 лет
was over
держала
10 years
напряжение
holding under
Азию,
pressure the
была
Asia
уничтожена
they were
советскими
taken out
войсками,
by
которые
Soviet
приехали из Берлина
that came
за
from
25
Berlin
дней.
in 25 days.
Когда мы читаем мемуары,
When we read the memoirs,
4 солдата, которые
4
дошли до
soldiers
Берлина,
that
4,
they
смогли
reached
уничтожить
Berlin,
целый гарнизон
they
японцев.
were able to
Они
hit the
знали,
whole
как
division.
воевать, они
They knew how to
с углом
fight. They knew how to.
заглядывали,
They
а те
looked
бежали
from
вперед.
angles,
Это
and
были
those that
очень
running
опытные
forward.
воины.
Those were very
Поэтому
experienced
сейчас,
warriors. So
в
now
России,
in Russia,
конечно, мы несем потери,
of
это
course,
факт.
yes,
И
we do
они
have losses,
существенные.
and they're major.
Уровень превышает, конечно же,
It
и
goes over
конфликты на Кавказе,
conflicts
в
at Kafkas and
Это уже
Afghanistan.
близко к
That's close
Великой
to
Отечественной войне,
World
мы
War
называем
II.
Вторую мировую войну.
That's what we call World War II, Great War for Russia.
Для России этот конфликт
But for
носит
Russia, this
совершенно иной
conflict
формат.
has a different
И вы
format.
правильно отметили, что
And
мы не
yes,
можем
you said
остановиться
correctly,
сейчас,
we cannot stop right now.
потому что на той
Because
стороне
on the other side,
режим Зеленского мы
there's Zelensky regime, what we call it.
продолжит терроризм,
It'll continue to be terroristic.
продолжит финансирование,
They will continue
мы их
to
называем колл-центры,
finance the call centers.
да. И, скорее всего, дроны будут лететь в нашу
And drones probably fly into our territory.
Более того, они сделают
And
шаг
more
еще
than
в
that,
большой
they
ракетной
made
программе.
another step into the rocket
И
program.
это повышает
And it
угрозу нового
increases the
конфликта.
threat of a new conflict.
Well, let me comment on how I have approached it, and you can correct me where I am wrong. It appears that in the first stage of the war, the special military operation, and from February until the end of March, when the expectation was that there could be a negotiated settlement. And based upon I had a conversation with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and he admitted that Russia was prepared to sign off on a proposal brought forward by Ukraine, but then with Western interference, that deal was canceled. So at that point, starting with the capture of Mariupol, that marked, I guess, what I'd call the first turning in the war. Because what was really caught my attention at the time was the ability of Russian forces to take this well-defended position, suffered losses, but not tremendous casualties. And the Ukrainians were incapable of mounting a counteroffensive. You know, I likened it to, if you will, a mini Stalingrad, where the 6th Army of von Paulus was trapped, surrounded by the Russians as a result of Operation Uranus. And the Germans did try to break through, but failed. We didn't even see an attempt by the Ukrainians to break through then. And that caught my attention, because that showed what is, I interpret that as limitations on their power. By August, you had a number of contract soldiers that the contracts were up. The manpower, because I think only like 125,000 Russian troops had gone in on the initial invasion, which counters all military doctrine, traditional military doctrine, where you should have a 3-to-1 advantage for attacking a defending force, and instead 6-to-1. And so, in this case, Russia's attacking 1-to-6, outnumbered, but still was quite effective. So then, with the fall of 2022, the rapid mobilization, and then the emphasis on recruitment, training, and then the war of attrition started. And I took the general staff, because I think some in the West misinterpret this as Putin calling the shots. And as I look at it, the general staff is doing the planning and making the recommendations. And it will, President Putin will then, say, yeah, sign off on it. We have seen then the Russian army defeat the equivalent of 3 different Ukrainian armies. And the second big defeat came in the so-called counteroffensive of June 2023, where the Russian defensive positions proved impregnable. Plus, the Western tactics were stupid. They wanted to launch offensive against entrenched troops without air power. There was no air power on the part of Ukraine. So it was like a suicide mission, which is...
Убийственная. Yes, allow me to give you a small comment here, interrupt, about this 23rd attack. We analyzed how ready they were, where they will go, and how they're getting ready. And we saw that they were getting ready under the American format. When Americans worked on a format of heavy divisions of the breakthrough, where they would come to 2027. The point is that, first of all, you have heavy machines that go forward, then heavy tanks and heavy equipment. And all this has to be covered from air.
Correct.
Все
Не
правильно.
только дроны.
Not just
Сотни
drones.
вертолетов,
No, it has to be
самолетов,
hundreds,
полный
helicopters,
господство в воздухе.
planes, everything.
И мы говорили, Украина
And we
есть все,
said,
кроме авиационной
Ukraine
составляющей.
has everything but air.
Они не могут пойти вперед,
They
если
can't go
они не будут
forward
закрыты
without
сверху.
that protection from the air.
И не может быть, что их
And it
отпустят
can't be
без
so
этого.
that they would give them a green light.
Наверное, где-то готовят
Probably
подразделения
somewhere
на
they
вертолетах
preparing on
Apache.
helicopters, Apaches or whatever.
Или американцы
Or
дадут
maybe
самолеты
Americans will find a
Thunderbird
plane,
2,
so
А-10.
Thunderbird A-10.
Потому что у них нет авиации.
Because they don't have
Но
aviation.
они пошли на самые
But
укрепленные наши
you know,
позиции.
they went against the most strongest positions that we had. It was all covered with mines and bombs. Hundreds of tanks were there. We don't understand why did they do that way. Why did they go that way? We still can't figure it out. That was a mistake.
Но я так понимаю, американцы изменили
But I
план, и теперь
understand that
понимают,
Americans
что, возможно,
changed the
такой
plan, and maybe
лобовой
this
удар надо менять.
face-to-face
Менять
heat you gotta
конструкцию.
change. You gotta change the construction for more real.
Но в России
But
мы
in
говорим,
Russia,
что мы воюем с зеркалом.
We speak that we fight with a mirror
Потому что с той стороны русские,
because Russians are on the other side,
которые могут
who
умирать, не
can
отступая назад.
die without giving up.
Последние десятилетия Россия
The
много
last
где
tens
принимала
of years,
участие в боях.
Russia took part in many battles.
Есть видео
We
в
have
Сирии,
videos in
когда,
Syria
например,
when,
наши советники
where
были
our
сирийскими
advisors
войсками,
were in a Syrian
например,
army,
бежит человек с
and we
бомбой.
see the person running with a bomb.
Все убегали.
Everybody runs away.
Наш солдат стоял спокойно в него стрелял.
Our
Он
soldier was
взрывался,
shooting.
мой друг стрелял, он
You know,
взрывался,
my
его,
friend was shooting, they would be
извиняюсь за
blown up.
выражение, части тела обсыпали.
You
А
know,
все остальные убегали.
Everybody was running away.
Просто пугались. Или могут
Everybody was
оставить
afraid.
позицию, уйти пить чай.
Or they can leave the position, go have some tea.
Для нас это неприемлемо.
It's not acceptable for Russian soldier. We're gonna fight.
И нам так тяжело сейчас на фронте.
And it's so heavy for us at the front because we see the same Russian people quickly changing, never giving up.
Очень много видео, как
We see a lot of videos where they get into one house
и обе погибают.
and they
Никто не
all
отступает,
die,
никто
and
не
they
сдается.
never, they don't give up, they don't
Мы понимаем, что если бы это были
surrender.
какие-то другие
We
войска,
understand
может быть,
it
было бы
would be a
проще.
different army. Maybe it would be
Вы
easier for
привели
us.
пример Сталинградскую битву.
You have given an example of
И мы смогли
Stalingrad's
сделать
battle.
окружение,
We could see this. You could see the
Потому что мы
surrounding
ударили
because
в слабые
we
части
hit from the weak
румынские
points
и
of
итальянские войска.
Romanian and Italian fighters.
И мы смогли легко пройти
That's
эту
why we
линию.
were able to surround them.
Здесь у нас таких
Here we don't
возможностей.
have such possibilities,
И приходится очень динамично
and we
меняться.
we have to move quickly
Но
and change
в
quickly.
моем понимании,
But in my
если
understanding,
Европа захочет
if
воевать
Europe
с
wants
Россией,
to fight with Russia,
для них это будет очень тяжело.
it's gonna be a very hard deal for
Потому
them.
что в качестве
Because
примера
just as a matter of example, I can give you
Россия
Russia
выпускает по Украине
issues towards Ukraine or the far distance about 10,000 pieces per month.
5000 тяжелых
5,000
бомбардирующих
heavy bombs.
бомб. Это огромные масштабы.
It's great scale.
1000 ракет и дронов,
1,000
выпущенных
rockets
по
and
территории
drones
Европы,
over
приведет
Europe.
их в шок. И
It's gonna
системы
bring it
ПВО
to
будут
shock. Their system
очень
will be
серьезно
out.
опустошены. Поэтому то, что
So
сейчас идет на
what
поле боя,
takes place at the battlefield now
с нашей стороны
on our
выглядит
side
тяжело. Со
looks
стороны
heavy.
Европы
On the
выглядит, как
European
русские
side
стоят
looks
на
like
месте, двигаться не могут.
Russians are standing and they
Ни одна
can't
армия
move
в мире
forward.
сейчас не сможет
Not
двигаться
one
вперед,
army in a war can
если
move
только
forward
ты не бросишь ядерную бомбу.
if you wouldn't throw the nuclear bomb.
Потому что стена
Because
дронов,
the
которая
drone
есть и у
wall
нас, и у
that
Украины,
both of countries have, both Russia and
это
Ukraine,
серая зона 40-50
it's a gray
километров.
zone of 40 to 50
Когда
kilometers.
дрон летает сверху,
And
не
when
видно
the-
ни одного живого
When the
человека.
drone flies over, you can see
если
one
ты идешь
human being.
вперед,
But if you move forward,
откуда-то из маленьких
somewhere out
нор
of
вылетают
small
дроны
things,
и начинают тебя стрелять.
drones are flying out, starts
Ответно
killing
некого
you.
уничтожать, ты их не можешь идентифицировать.
But you cannot identify them.
Поэтому сейчас, когда
So
Украина контратакует,
when Ukraine has a counter strike, they
мы их
bring the
видим, мы
reserves.
можем наносить
We
удары,
see
они
them and we
несут
can
очень
hit them,
большие
and they have a lot of consequences, a lot of losses.
Well, and in fact, the evolution of this war. 3.5 years ago, I don't think the Russian general staff was anticipating a drone war in the way that it has evolved, but rapidly caught on, incorporated that in the planning. And now you've got, I think, at least 4 or 5 major classes of drones that some are strictly for intelligence, reconnaissance. Some are directly attack drones. Some have actually more of a, the Garan, the much larger one, the Shahid, can take out precise targets. So it's changed the entire face of warfare, and yet the West has been very slow to catch up to it. Because one, they have to rely upon China to try to produce, and China is not cooperating. So as the case I've tried to explain to Americans is that, in fact, I asked, I don't know if you're familiar with General Evgeny Buzinsky, retired general. And so I had an interview with him a couple of months back. And I asked him, I said, why hasn't Russia blown up all the bridges, the key logistic routes across the Dnieper, and trapped the Ukrainian army without the ability to resupply itself? And he laughed initially and said, I've been asking that myself. But then as we talked about it, he said, he thinks that from the general staff planning position, that they didn't want to cut the army off, the Ukrainian army off yet, because of Ukrainian forces could have stayed on the West Bank, which would have then defeated the objective of demilitarization. And so it was better to allow them to come across. And now what we're seeing, 2 years ago, there would be the Battle of Bakhmut. And maybe a year ago, the Battle of Avdiivka. But now, you're seeing the battle all along the line of contact. And it is now stretching the Ukrainian ability to respond. And at the same time, it is accelerating Russian advance while still minimizing casualties on the Russian side. And here, when I hear the American experts talk about how slow the Russians are moving, then I bring up the case. I said, well, when Russia and Ukraine exchange bodies of soldiers, for every one Russian body that's turned over, Russia is turning 40 to 50 Ukrainian bodies. So then they turn around and say, yeah, but that's because Russia is moving so fast, the Ukrainians don't have time to recover the bodies. So I'm saying, well, which is it? They're moving too fast, or they're moving real slow? Which is it? Pick a side, just tell me.
Yes, indeed, we ask the same questions. Why we don't hit those centers where decisions are taken? How come we didn't hit energy center? We could have done the full blackout in 2022. Our spies that were planning those things, we have 11 points we hit, they turn off the whole electricity. But there could be a problem for civilians. The cities would be dark, people gonna have to run, do something. And however it would sound stupid, our leadership maybe would make less problems for civilians. Though it would be Americans, probably first night they would do it. They would just take it out, just like it happened in Yugoslavia. Concerning bridges, unfortunately, Soviet Union, they made them so strong. They could have 250 to 500 kilos of bombs.
мост
We
нельзя.
can't even break them with the rockets.
Это должно,
It has
эти
to,
бомбы должны падать с самолета
these
сверху
bombs
вниз.
has to
То есть
fly
крылатая
from
ракета это не ударит.
sky. You can't hit it with a rocket. The bomb has to
Это-
fly
это
from the sky.
Несколько тонн надо.
It's a few tons you have to throw.
Поэтому
Drop down.
что железные дороги, что
So
мосты,
whatever
это
the
очень мощные сооружения,
railroad and bridges, these are very powerful
которые
things.
достаточно быстро можно починить.
And you can fix them quickly.
В качестве примера,
As an example,
Антоновский мост из Херсона
Antonov's bridge from Kherson
получил 38
had
ударов Хаймерса.
38 hits, Hammers hits.
Он был в дырочках,
It had some holes
которые можно накрыть металлическим листом и ехать
that
дальше.
you can put some metal sheet and drive
А
over
в
it.
итоге его взорвали
In the end,
российские
it was
военные
blown
инженеры,
up by the
заложив несколько
military
тонн
engineers
взрывчатки.
putting a few tons of bomb.
Что касается линии фронта,
Concerning the front line,
действительно,
Indeed.
все пытаются оценить,
Everybody
идешь вперед или стоишь на
evaluates
месте,
what are
как
you
успех.
moving forward or going back as a success line.
Но военная
But
теория говорит о том,
military
что есть
theory
три
says
центра
that there's three
сопротивления,
centers of standing against, and
сломив которые ты побеждаешь.
the ones that you break on, you win the war.
Это армия,
That's army,
столица
capital,
и союзники.
and allies.
Линии фронта здесь нет.
Front line is not the one that mentioned. There's no movement. Everything is stable there.
Как в Первую мировую,
Just
линия
like in
фронта в
World War
Европе
II,
не менялась, и армия Германии
The army of Germany was capitulated because they didn't have enough strength.
А линия фронта была
But
на
the
одном
front
месте.
line was there.
Поэтому каждый день
So
украинские солдаты
each day,
погибают,
Ukrainian
и этот
soldiers
процесс не
are
может быть
dying,
бесконечным,
and
им не
it cannot
хватит
be
людей.
endless. They won't have enough people.
В качестве примера
As an example,
я вспоминаю разговор с одним командиром
I
спецподразделения.
remember a conversation with one of the special
Когда
forces
я
commander.
занимаюсь гуманитарными поставками,
I do humanitarian supply,
и он попросил огнетушители.
and he
Много.
asked the fire extinguishers, a
Он
lot of
говорит,
them.
что украинские удары
He says
загораются,
Ukrainian
и нужно
hits,
тушить в
everything
блиндажах.
burns up, flames up, and you
И
have to
солдаты
use the
говорят, что очень
extinguisher.
тяжело, со стороны Украины летит много
And a
дронов.
lot of drones are flying from Ukrainian
Он
side.
ему сказал, вы не
Where he
знаете,
said,
что испытывают солдаты там.
You don't understand what the
Когда
soldiers
туда
feel there.
прилетает
When
1,5–3 тонны бомба,
3 tons of bombs are
нам
flying there.
здесь страшно, мы не знаем, что
We're afraid here.
И
We
они
don't
стоят на
understand.
месте,
And
они
they're still
продолжают,
standing there.
они не бегут.
They're still fighting, they're not running
Поэтому,
away.
как я уже
They don't
говорил, это
surrender.
зеркало.
As I said, it's a mirror war.
Поэтому нам не так сложно, как там и те потери.
We're
которые
not
там.
as difficult situation as they are. We don't have as many casualties as they have.
После
Nobody
таких
knows till the
больших
end.
ударов тела невозможно
You
найти.
cannot find the bodies after such big hits. They just disappear.
Yeah, and would you agree with me that there has been a decided shift in, because I believe the general staff is following a plan that was drawn up maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, once the war, in the wake of the counteroffensive, and that they are methodically following that plan. They're not rigid. I mean, they're still thinking, gathering new intelligence, and they're not just going to follow a plan because it's written down. They are flexible. But the plan that they put together seems to have been working effectively in demilitarizing not just the Ukrainian army, but, and I think this may have surprised the Russian military in general. They didn't realize how quickly they would weaken NATO, because all of a sudden, I think there may have been the assumption that NATO had strategic depth. And now what we've seen is that with the use of artillery, the West, all of it, the United States and Europe combined, can't match what Russia produces. We saw the same with all the different, Wunderwaffen, all the wonder weapons, the HIMARS, the ATACMS, the Storm Shadows, the F-16. And right now you're seeing the discussion about the possible use of Tomahawks. And so many of the people in the West talking about it don't understand that it's a pinpoint weapon. It's not an area weapon. It's like a really expensive drone. It may have a 300 kilogram warhead, that's tops. The one that was designed to carry a nuclear device is not in place right now. And I've got a friend, Andrey who is, he left shortly after the Soviet Union collapsed, but he was a naval officer, and he's written 5 books. The first one was called Losing Military Supremacy, and it was explaining the disadvantage that the West had vis-a-vis Russia. And he did that 8 years ago. Brilliant book. But he was explaining the other day that he selected one refinery and noted it would take 100 Tomahawk missiles to destroy that one refinery here in Russia. The United States doesn't have 100 Tomahawk missiles to give. So again, it's one of these gestures, symbolic gestures, without any real tactical or strategic significance. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And there's a difference in systems. In America and all over NATO, military plants are all private. And we have state plants. And as a state plant, we have certain powers that we conserve. For the period of war, we can make a great supply. That's why we supply 3 million bullets per year, and it increases. Private companies not gonna have all that because it takes a lot more money. And when 155 bullet costs $300, right now it's over $8,000. Private company is better to raise the price. It's a market. Russia, we can issue weapons, we can manufacture weapons by millions. When I was asking how come we use steel pockets for the patrons, for the bullets, and not out of bronze like Europeans and Americans? Because we can do millions per day like that, and we don't have pressure. They come to find out the air system. We have a generation over the protection air system, and we can have a lot of rockets out there. And in US, they did the Patriot, they manufactured Patriot, and the rest of the partners, they forbid to create the system on the same level, so everybody would buy from Americans. And the whole world, they issue only 600 rockets per year. Per year. And I already said we make 10,000 bombs, drones per month.
Right. Well, remember, on those Patriots, if there is for example, if they're trying to take out a Iran drone, or even an Iskander or Kunshal, they're going to fire a minimum of 2, more often 4 missiles just to take out the one incoming. And as you pointed out, you know, one day Russia's firing 800 missiles and drones, another day 600. Well, if they fire, let's just say they fire 2 for 600. Not that they can, but if they could, that would use up 2 years of production right there in one day. That's why I said that they haven't thought this through at all.
I was at the manufacturing plant that issues Geranians, and I had a feeling that just like in the movies of the Star Wars by Lucas, on the base of somewhere under the ground, they go further and they have planes and some kind of welding goes on. That's the same scale. Huge power, huge capacities. When I saw that, it's huge. But it makes technologically from carbon like a bullet from Formula 1. A racing car. And it's a lot of them. And I've asked, how come we produce so many?
Говорит, мы делаем на будущую войну.
They sued for we do it for a future war.
Не все, что мы выпускаем,
Not
идет на фронт.
everything that goes to the front line, some goes in a warehouse.
И мы перешли на новое поколение.
And we went into the new generation when drones are flying with as a bird crowd with a AI in it.
Управляют друг другом и могут
And they
уничтожать
manage
поезда,
each other,
которые идут в движении.
and they can take out the trains that are on
Есть
movement.
видео в интернете.
And we have a video on the
Ночью с
internet
тепловизором.
on at night time with the special
Головной
equipment, night
дрон
vision.
определяет состав.
The head of the drones divides the other drones, and they start taking out the train, the
Это
carton by
технология,
carton.
которая пока, может
It's a
быть, даже
technology,
нет у
could be,
американцев.
even Americans don't have that.
Потому что у них есть самонаводящиеся
Because they have
ракеты
self-aiming
только по кораблям.
rockets only on boats.
Right. Well, in fact, without divulging military secrets, the average the S3 version of the Patriot missile, each one costs $7 million.
PAC-3 MSC.
Yeah,
MSI.
yeah. My guess is that let's say the Garan drone does not cost $1 million. It costs much less than $1 million. So think of that. They're firing $14 million worth of missiles to take a missile out that, maybe a couple of $100,000 or $100,000. And economically unsustainable.
Поэтому Зеленский предложил Трампу
This is
на
why
последней встрече,
Zelensky offered at the last meeting with Trump that they're ready to make the underground plants to put together rockets.
и у нас, и в Америке ракеты собираются вручную.
Both at our place and in America, rockets are done by
Самое сложное это
manual
блок
force.
управления.
The block of management, the control block is the most difficult thing. Because you got a lot of mechanics there,
Гироскопы, различные системы
different
наведения,
connections,
всё это
all
собирается
that
вручную,
is done by
достаточно
hand.
медленно.
Quite slow.
Я видел, как это делают
I
в
have
России,
seen how they do it
тоже
in
вручную
Russia
женщины
by
сидят,
hand,
собирают.
women putting
И
it
это
together.
очень сложно резко нарастить.
And it's hard to grow the scale,
Но я не
those
думаю,
sizes,
что
but I don't think that
американцы готовы передать эту технологию для сборки.
Americans are ready to give that technology to
Одна
Ukrainians.
европейская компания
One
готова
European
собирать
company is ready to
ракеты
put
для
together the
Patriot 50
rockets,
штук в год.
only 50 pieces per year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's,
Это недостаточно.
It's not enough.
yeah, it is. There is the United States, or we go back to World War II.
Если мы вот вернемся во Вторую мировую,
In World War II,
во Второй мировой
the United States was able to build as many Sherman tanks
смогли построить как
as Russia could build T-34s.
как Россия Т-34.
And, so they had comparable industrial
То есть у
capabilities.
них была такая хорошая индустриальная возможность.
But what made the then Soviet Union's effort so remarkable
И что вот было такое большим достижением
is
Советского Союза?
in the face of Operation Barbarossa, they had to dismantle factories and move them en masse
То есть,
to the other
как
side of the
им
Urals.
нужно было разобрать заводы, перенести их и заново производить эти танки.
A phenomenal accomplishment.
Феноменальное достижение.
But today,
А сегодня
Russia still has that industrial
у
base.
России есть такая индустриальная база,
The United States does
а
not.
в США нет.
It's lost it.
Они потеряли.
It's like when I'm an old man now,
Я
but
вообще,
50 years ago,
50 лет назад
my father was a steel worker.
отец, он работал со
And we had a steel plant, and I lived in the Kansas City
в
area.
Канзасе.
That plant is gone, not there.
Этого завода больше нет.
Other of my schoolmates,
Мои школьные
we were all
товарищи,
middle class. All fathers worked in factories, were building something, were working with oil refineries,
с переработкой нефти,
building farm equipment.
делали сельхозоборудование.
All of that is gone.
Этого ничего нет.
Да.
And so this is why
Это вот
the
поэтому
failure in the West to understand
Запад этого не
the
понимает,
scale of industrial capability required to wage modern war.
который требуется для ведения войны. Они не
Мы
понимают.
в усилении вашего тезиса,
To make stronger your thesis,
когда мы хотим оценить экономический
When
потенциал страны,
we want to evaluate the economical
мы
potential of the
смотрим его
country.
торгово-экономический
We look at
баланс.
their trading economical balance.
Положительно он или отрицательный.
Either it is positive or negative.
Потому что если он отрицательный,
Because if it is negative,
ты завозишь товаров больше, чем ты
you
производишь.
bring more products than you
Значит, эту
produce,
разницу
which means that
Ты берешь
difference.
кредиты
You
или
take
у
credits
населения, или на внешнем
from
конкуренте.
people or from the outer market.
Например,
For
у
example,
Китая
China
положительное
has a
сальдо
positive
в
saldo
год
per year,
около
But
250-300 миллиардов долларов.
250 to 300 billion dollars.
У России
Russia,
чуть
it's like
меньше.
somewhat
200.
not less, 200.
Америка
America
последние
last
15 лет
15 years
имеет отрицательное
has
сальдо
negative balance,
уже в 1,5 триллиона долларов.
$1.5 trillion.
То есть американцы
Which
печатают
means
деньги
America prints the
и
money
скупают товары со всего мира.
and buys the product from all over the world.
Поэтому все фабрики, о
This
которых
is
вы
why
говорили,
all the
были
manufacturing
закрыты.
plants
Зачем
that you're
делать
speaking
самим, мы это
about,
получим
they close.
бесплатно.
Why? We're gonna get it free.
Но они слабые. Если
But they're
мир
weak.
откажется от доллара,
If the world will refuse from the dollar,
они останутся ни с чем.
they will be left with
У нас и
nothing.
у Китая будут
Us in
производства,
China will have
добыча
production,
рублей, вся
will get
система.
mining, the
А у
whole
Америки
system.
будут проблемы.
In America will have problems.
Они сейчас пытаются
Now
возвращать
they're
предприятия.
bringing back the manufacturing.
Но это тоже не
But
так легко
it's
сделать,
not
когда
takes
рабочие были
overnight
утеряны.
when the workers were lost.
Для нас это было удивительно,
For us, it was a
когда
surprising thing when
Америка решила восполнить запасы
America was trying to do the
Stinger.
rocket Stingers warehouse
Они
storage.
сказали, нам нужно
They
7
said
лет,
we need 7 years
потому что мы брали ветеранов с
because
производства,
we brought veterans from production
veterans,
Yeah.
то для производства,
for the production
потому что молодежь не знает, не
because
умеет.
young people don't know how to do it.
Right.
Все правильно.
И сейчас идет большая
And now
глобальная гонка,
we have a global racing,
и,
global
возможно,
competition.
Надеюсь, что наш президент убедит
Hopefully
Трампа,
that our president will
что
assure Trump that what takes place now in this conflict, it's a very big numbers,
дронов, танков,
huge
людей.
numbers, drones, tanks, people from many European countries. It's somewhere there. They don't understand till the end how serious that is.
Когда, например, какая-нибудь
When some kind of
прибалтийская страна грозит
Baltic
воевать
country
с нами,
says that they will fight with
а
us,
у нее
and they have
солдат меньше, чем
soldiers
на одну бригаду,
less than one brigade,
и они считают по
and they
пальцам
think
одной
that
руки
they can
квадроциклы, которые
hand
летят на
quadricycles on one hand fingers.
Well, you also have the Chinese advances with robots that are robot factories. And with the cooperation now, because we're looking at a broad-based cooperation, economic, political, military between China and Russia. And
секретная.
yeah, that one of the complaints, one of the false analysis in the West is that Russia's running out of men and it doesn't have enough men to work in the factories. Well, that Russia has a nice problem. It has low unemployment. Anybody that wants a job can get a job. But also with what China's doing, willing to share that technology with Russia, and in turn Russia shared technology with China, that level of cooperation is going to completely overwhelm the West in its ability to compete.
Да, например, технологии гиперзвуковых ракет.
For example, hypersound technology.
Она есть у нас,
We have it.
у Китая.
China has it.
4
4
Kinshal,
Циркон.
Zircon, Орешник.
Ну, это стратегически
That's
уже, да.
strategic already, but
И
yes.
циркон будет скоро на
And
на
Zircon would be
земле.
on the land.
И это работает.
And that works.
Да, действительно,
Yes, indeed.
гиперзвуковые технологии, которые не
Hypersound
могут остановиться
technologies
на Западе,
cannot be stopped in the
могут
West.
утопить авианосные
They can
группы
put down all Navy that carry the air.
yeah.
и остановить их нельзя.
You can't stop them, they're
И
unstoppable.
действительно, наше
And indeed, our
взаимодействие с Китаем,
partnership with China,
мы это закрыли, чтобы это
we
не было
have closed it.
транзакций
So
долларов,
the transactions of dollars are not there, and also
пересечение границ,
crossing the borders.
чтобы противник
So the
Запада не понимал,
opponent,
где
as a West, would not understand where is what.
В качестве иллюстрации,
Just an illustration.
Америка великая страна.
America's a
Я много
great
раз там был,
country.
мне очень нравится.
I have been there, I like that
Но
country.
когда мы смотрим
But
на
when we
динамично
look
развивающиеся
at the
азиатские
dynamic
страны, скоростные
Asian
поезда,
countries developing
небоскребы, мы
and
задаемся вопросом,
skyscrapers,
а сколько километров
we ask the
скоростных
question,
железных дорог США?
how many railroads on a high-speed trains do they have?
Ноль.
None.
Когда мы видим, что каждый день
When
в
every
Америке
day
3 железнодорожных
America
аварии,
has 3 railroad collisions,
и я спрашиваю специалистов,
and I ask
почему
the
так
specialists,
часто у них
why so
происходит?
often? Why does it take place so
Они
often?
используют технологии 19
They
века,
use the
спалные из дерева.
technologies of the 19th century as the railroads from the wood,
И до сих пор деревянные их не меняют.
and they don't change them.
У нас на территории России нет ни одного
Russia, we don't have those
пути, где деревянные
technologies
шпалы.
where you have a
Потому что
wooden
рельсы будут
rails,
гулять.
because that means the rails are going to be flexible, they're going to
Почему
move.
Америка не тратит
Why
деньги на
America
это,
does
на
not
свои
spend money
дороги,
on that, on the
мосты,
railroads, on bridges,
уровень жизни,
level of
отправляет
life,
их все время на экспорт.
by send it for
Уровень
export?
жизни американцев
The
снижается.
level of life of Americans
Oh, but-
decreases.
Believe me, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 40 years, and then I would travel on what was called Amtrak to New York City. And, you know, again, a 4-hour trip, that was, you know, you're going 240 miles. So, yeah, you're basically traveling at an average speed of 60 miles per hour, so 100 miles, 100 kilometers per hour,
То есть 100 километров в час.
which is nothing.
Но это вообще ничто.
And you are correct with, particularly
По поводу
with the failure to build hypersonic missiles.
что нет вот этих
And then-
суперзвуковых ракет.
To train, well,
Но чтобы
I would presume that you have studied now, made a case study out of what the United States failed to do in the Red Sea with the Houthis.
вы сделали определенные свои выводы.
Because we declared victory and went home
Но мы
because we
долго
could not,
провозгласили победу,
we couldn't
по-другому не
defeat the
могли.
Houthis.
Мы вот даже своих
And yet-
собственных не могли победить.
Trump talks about taking on Russia.
А Трамп говорит о том, что мы победим Россию. Это
I'm guessing here.
я так просто тут
I think Russia has a little more military
Я
power
думаю,
than the
что,
Houthis.
скорее всего, у русских гораздо больше, чем у наших собственных. Кто-то наши границы пытается завоевать.
Я надеюсь, что мы никогда
I
не
hope that
дойдем
we'll
до
never get to the
реального
point
военного
of the real
противостояния,
military conflict,
потому что это может перерасти в стратегические ядерные
because it can go into the strategic nuclear bombs.
Вот. Но американский
But
военно-промышленный комплекс,
American war military-industrial
5
complex,
крупных компаний,
5 huge companies,
постоянно толкает Белый
constantly
дом
pressure White
на
House
продажу новых
for sales of a new
Европу,
packages to Europe,
последующей передаче
with the
Украине.
future passing over to
Потому
Ukraine.
что Трамп продавил
Because
сейчас
Trump
5%
pushed
от
now
ВВП
5% from the
бюджета.
turnover of the budget,
И очень хотят, чтобы это были американцы.
and they want it to be American military.
И это речь идет о больших деньгах.
And we speak about big money here.
Мы понимаем, что за
We
этими
understand
компаниями
that
стоят
behind
три
these
крупных
companies
транснациональных
there's
фонда
3
BlackRock,
huge BlackRock
Vanguard
national funds,
и,
Vanguard
State Street.
and State Street,
И они не воспринимают как Америка
and
и
they
Европа.
don't
Для них
understand
это просто
America,
большой
Europe
рынок,
is just big
пересекающийся.
market of money.
Но для нас это, конечно, риски.
But for us it's a huge risk.
Я хотел задать вопрос.
I wanted to ask a question.
Мы Трампу предложили
We have offered to Trump
продлить договор
to
о
prolong
стратегических
about the
наступательных вооружениях
strategic attacking that contract we're
на
speaking
1
about
год для
for one
согласования
more
нового
year
контракта.
to agree a new contract.
А Трамп, выступая на трибуне ООН,
And Trump is speaking at the UN Tribune,
предложил миру, не только нам,
and he offered to the whole world
новый договор
new
о
contract
запрете
about forbidding
биологического оружия.
biological weapon.
Хотя мы знаем, что у
Though we
американцев
know
самая
that
крупная военная
Americans
программа
have
по
the
всему
most
миру,
military program on that
и на
around the
Украине в
world.
том числе. Почему Трамп решил это остановить?
Why
Если
did
они
Trump want
лидеры
to
по
stop it?
разработке
If they're
лекарств,
leaders
оружия, всего, и
in the
изучения
weapons and the development and the studying of that, why did he offer that?
You know, so much of America's defense policy
Вообще вся политика
is driven by financial considerations, and by that I mean
состоит от финансовых интересов.
how to enrich
Как
those corporations and their
обогатить эти
shareholders.
корпорации,
So
генералов,
the decisions about doing
поэтому решение
is not based upon strategy or even what works best tactically. So you then it's not just Trump's fault, because it also goes back to George W. Bush when he walked away from the anti-ballistic missile treaty agreement. Then Donald Trump abrogated the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement and basically have been signaling that they'll let New START die. But President Putin's offer to extend it was not rejected by Trump, but there really is not anybody in government with, let's call it, memory of arms control. You know, the people like Scott Ritter, who were involved on it 20 years ago, have not been replaced. You don't have a new generation of experts. So, you know, again, America is not guided by a strategic vision. And that's the problem.
We would love to believe that such strategies would be there, but we understand that the funds, like Rand Corporation, where they have the biggest budgets, all the experts they bring to themselves, and they're getting ready for reports for the White House that are profitable to all these big financial giants. They bring in the White House into confusion. We remember the report of that corporation, and 2 months before the beginning of the conflict at Ukraine, spoke that for America to lift up its economy, there's only one way: to provoke Russians for conflict onto Ukraine, cut off the cheap energy that goes from Russia to Europe. We know that north ones were blown up. To cut cheap electricity from France, and it went up 300%. And after that, German economy starts collapsing and starts moving to the United States. And that happened today. But they didn't write down in their report how have a solution to it. Then in 23 they came with a conclusion what needs to be done. And they said that you can stop this conflict only in the framework, not on a peace treaty, but a political regulation, when you will stop military action. But the weaker chain, who would be against it and be really an obstacle, would be Zelensky manipulation. Because the image of the future in 10 years, Ukraine and United States, they don't have the same. Ukraine, it's a constant war. In the United States, it's been empire, and that has to be in cooperation with Russia. And they offered that you have to purchase or buy Zelensky, offer him money to restore in Ukraine more than he would make money than he's making now. Looks like they didn't make that offer to him. It's not clear who's going to restore Ukraine, because money, Europeans, they don't have it. Because Trump reserved $600 billion. That was investment to America in the technologies for AI.
Yeah, well, what we're looking at is the U.S. military budget is China. It is twice that of Russia and China's military defense budget combined. And yet, yeah, I mean, there is such a disparity in force, whether we're talking the hypersonic missiles or drones capabilities. I guess, I'm a little
Я
surprised
очень удивлен,
that both Russia and China are continuing
что Россия и
programs
Китай продолжают
to
программы
build fifth and sixth
строить
generation
пятые,
fighters.
шестые ракеты, пятые,
Because
шестые поколения.
They're now becoming, I think those systems are
То есть
becoming
вот эти
obsolete
системы сейчас как бы не
because of
особо
drone and
нужны,
missile technology.
остаются из-за технологий дронов.
Just in the same way that
Точно так же
there was a time in the
было
Army
время в армии,
when they had saddles for horses.
когда делали седла для лошадей.
But at the advent of the machine gun, a horse was no longer
Того, как
made a lot
сделали
of
автомат,
sense.
да, автоматическое оружие,
And I think that's
не
what,
было нужды в лошадях.
yeah, and the tank as well. So we've got these legacy
То есть у нас
systems
такая система наследия.
that are, very costly, particularly in the
Очень
West,
дорогая, особенно на Западе.
that need to, be retired.
Ее как-то нужно на пенсию отпустить.
And I think both the Chinese and the Russian military have more flexibility on that front to say, okay, this no longer makes sense. Good job. We're done.
Мне очень нравится смотреть,
I like
как
to watch how Trump
давит на военные
pressures
технологии.
the military
С учетом,
technologies,
нравится ему
counting
это
in
внешне или нет.
if he likes it, the outward look or not.
Да, мы знаем, что он
Yes,
украшает
we know
золотом
he
камин в
puts
овальном кабинете.
gold in the Oval Office.
Это его вкус.
Whatever, that's his taste and
Но когда он
preferences.
повесил себе значок самолета,
But when he
ему
put
задали
the
вопрос,
airplane
почему это
pin
самолеты в
on,
22, что это значит?
what is that F-22
Он
plane?
говорит, ничего, мне
He says,
подарили
doesn't
разные
matter.
значки, я выбрал самый красивый.
They just gave me different planes, they different pins. I took the best one I
Когда он
liked.
сказал, что новые
But when I-
американские эсминцы Зуваль
The new Zuvalt
слишком
Navy
некрасивые,
boats, they're not
сделаны по
pretty.
технологии стелса, они
Though
должны
they
быть
were
другие.
made the stealth technology, they
И
are
вообще надо
different.
возвращаться к
And we need to
большим
get back to the
кораблям,
big
линкорам,
boats of linkers
которые сейчас не должны строиться.
that
Сейчас
shouldn't be
компактные
built now.
дроны,
The
стая
drones,
рассыпается,
they
сходится.
do completely different
И
technologies.
его
They go
влияние на
in,
эти
go
процессы
go out.
уводит американский военно-промышленный сторону.
And by these comments, he takes the
это
military-industrial
наследие прошлого,
complex
сейчас уже
away,
другое.
aside. We need
Скорость.
completely different things. We need speed.
Поэтому гиперзвуковые
That's
системы
hypersound systems. They are.
это будущее.
That's the future.
В качестве примера,
As an example,
если у нас получится
if we will work out
гиперзвуковую ракету
hypersound
«Циркон»
Zircon rockets, make it for the soil complex and make it against Navy,
то батареи
then
таких систем,
the batteries of those
например, в
systems, for
Венесуэле,
example, in Venezuela,
остановят любое начало операции. Она
they will
потопит все
stop
корабли
every
американские.
beginning of the operation. All the boats will be sunk.
С огромным количеством людей и много
With a lot of people, a lot of
и остановить
casualties.
их будет очень
It won't be
сложно.
possible to probably impossible to stop those
Китай
systems.
сейчас инвестирует большие деньги в
China right now
технологии
invests big money into the
будущего.
technologies of the
У нас
future.
на фронте уже воюют китайские лазерные комплексы.
We already have laser Chinese
Сбивают
complex
дроны.
fighting. They're
И
taking
очень
out drones and very effectively.
Только топливо подвозить.
Just bring
Не
the
нужны
fuel.
ни ракеты, ничего.
Don't need rockets, don't need anything
Дождь,
else.
снег, ему не важно,
Rain,
всё
snow,
делают.
doesn't matter. They do
И
what
это
they want to
первое
do.
поколение.
And that's the
А они
first
сейчас делают
generation.
следующее.
And they're
На
making
параде
another
они
one.
себя
At the
показали.
parade, they have shown that.
Поэтому они не инвестируют так много в ракеты, как у нас.
So
а
they don't
идут на
invest as much
следующее
money to the
поколение.
rockets, they go to another
Потому
generation.
что ракеты это технология,
Because
но они
rockets
тоже
are
требуют
technology-wise,
изменений.
but they also need changes.
Поэтому нам есть что
So we
противопоставить.
have something to
И мы
stand
видим,
against with.
что
And we see
гибкость,
that
которая есть у
The
нас, её
flexibility
нет у
that we
европейцев,
have, it
например.
goes into the Europeans.
Но при этом потихонечку они все равно
But
готовятся
step by
к
step,
30-м
they're
годам
getting ready for the
воевать с нами
30s
на земле.
to fight with us on the ground.
Мы не понимаем, зачем,
We don't understand why,
но, возможно, это
but possibly
увод,
it's taken
военно-промышленного
away the
комплекса в
military-industrial complex to another side.
Такая гонка вооружений.
Such a competition
Yeah,
for
it's very much it's a political process,
политический процесс,
not a military
не
process.
военный процесс.
So what we've witnessed during the special military
То,
operation
что мы видим с СВО,
is once recognized that the Ukrainians had developed some electronic warfare capability that was taking out drones,
украинцы пришли к какой-то новой технологии, которая
commanders on the front line said, hey, we need to have some, that fiber optic capability to counter this, and quickly provide it.
это создается, это поставляется.
Whereas in the United States, if they were going to try to do that,
Если они попытаются так сделать,
well, they'd first have to put it out for bid,
сначала им нужно сделать
but
конкурс, потом
in putting it out for bid, they would hire
нанять
a defense lobbyist,
лоббистов,
and the ones that had paid the most money and were paying the most money to members of Congress
чтобы они платили членам
would
Конгресса,
likely get the contract,
чтобы они подписали
and it
контракт.
wouldn't, it might take a year or two for that even to get delivered.
А технологии уже поменялись.
Whereas here, this,
Already changed.
it happened within weeks.
А сейчас за неделю это здесь
Within
всё
weeks.
происходит. Неделю на это.
And that's not just that's just one example.
Не только вот один единственный пример.
So that's the difference.
Вот в этом и есть разница.
The U.S. defense capability.
Защита США и
or
возможности обороны США.
So yeah, they've changed the name. It's now the War Department.
Это не военная,
They're not very good at that either.
то есть военный департамент. Ну и в этом у нас тоже не очень хорошо все получается.
Ларри, мы благодарим
Larry, we just want to thank you.
вас. Мы будем завершать.
We're going to finish the
Я в
podcast.
конце хотел
But
задать
in the
один
end, I
вопрос.
wanted to ask us a
Прошу
question.
короткий ответ.
Just a short
Как
answer.
вы думаете, Трамп в
What do you
рамках
think?
Министерства войны
Trump in a Ministry of War
нападет на
Department,
Венесуэлу или нет?
would he hit Venezuela or not?
Duh.
Спасибо
Thank you
большое
very
за
much.
откровенный разговор.
For
Международный клуб народного единства
International Club of the People's Unity, we want to say thank you and appreciate the work of Mr. Larry, that he found possibility and time to come to Moscow, not to be afraid of propaganda and fear, to see beautiful Russian cities, Russians, and the main point for us is honestly discuss the questions that take place now in the world, including open up for us how Americans think. Simple American. We're not talking about politicians, because we see the people in the White House. For us Russians, it's important in a framework of this people's unity to hear the words of regular Americans, what they think about, what they're going to, what kind of thoughts they have. We hope to see you again. It's definitely not the last meeting, and you would be our guest forever.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's important the work that the International Unity Club is doing to promote dialogue. Communication between both nations is critical. I hope that President Trump continues to communicate with President Putin, but as well as communicate that he listens and understands. So, thank you again, my friend.
Спасибо.
Yeah,
Thank you.
спасибо.